All right, let's go ahead and open our EFI partition. Double click that. Clover. And double click on the config.plist or property list. And that's going to launch Clover Configurator. The ACPI tab here, this is where the patches for any issues that you may encounter. And here's a list of patches, and you can actually populate the screen there, or the field. A couple to keep an eye out for is AZAL to HDEF and HDAS to HDEF. This relates to the onboard audio. Whether or not this correlates with the fix I'm going to show you in the next video, I'm not totally certain, but I left it as is and it did work. And if you have other issues with USB, you can fix USB here. And if you're having trouble with FireWire 800, Hackintoshes are kind of notorious for not working well with FireWire 800. I have a PCIe card with a FireWire 400 and 800 port, and it works pretty well. So I do not actually need this, and I don't need the USB fixes either. But this area is where you can fix some of the problems that you may be encountering. I'd say leave them all blank, with the exception of what's created by MultiBeast, and don't check any of this stuff until you've noticed that you actually have any issues, and then maybe go back into your config plist. And this number 2 tab, I believe this is for legacy boards, so older motherboards. So you can go ahead and not worry about that if you don't have to. Next, let's go to boot tab. Very important here. Kexts dev mode equals 1. Dart equals 0, that's already there by default, and this one's really important. The MPCI equals 0x3000. My setup requires it, yours may not. You may need the MPCI equals 0x2000, so go ahead and check that if need be. I like to keep it in verbose because I'm not quite 100% yet, so I like to see what's going on as I'm booting up, and if I see any issues, I can further track it down and find out possibly what the issue is. Dark wake, keep this at just here. Don't select no 0 1. Apparently doesn't work for me, so, or it may work as is like this, so just you may have to mess with this, but for me this works. Also NVIDIA underscore DRV equals 1. We will no longer need this NV disable equals 1 once we install our NVIDIA web driver for our GTX 970 NVIDIA graphics card. So this is good here. Timeout, this is really important. This is where it'll either boot directly to this default boot drive here, or it'll go to the Clover splash page that'll show you all your hard drives that are connected. So if you set it to 0, it's automatically going to jump here. And this is kind of important when you're doing your system updates. It'll automatically reboot into this drive and not get confused and look at your Clover startup screen. -1 will actually just go directly to that screen and sit there indefinitely until you do something. Or you can set it to 20 seconds here, 30 seconds, I believe up to a minute, and then it'll choose to go to this drive after that time is done. But I'm gonna keep it at 0 for now. XMP detection, this does not appear to work for me. There is a code you can enter in your text mode, but the reason for this is when you go to your About This Mac, you may not see the proper amount of RAM, and you may not see some of the other things there. It's purely cosmetic to my knowledge. One of my test boots, it actually said I had 128 gigs of RAM, but I only have 64. 128 would be nice, but I don't have that. So you can click no or try yes and see if that helps you. All right. And let's go ahead into boot graphics. Nothing there, skip that. CPU, this I was messing around with, but it seemed to, when I actually entered the bus speed and frequency information, it actually slowed my machine down, so I'm not going to mess with this, so I suggest you don't either. All right, devices. Fake ID, you'll get different results on different boards and different setups, but this seemed to work best for me, so match all these, 0x0. USB, you're going to want to, inject at clock ID, fixed ownership, and high current. Audio inject, I'll keep this at 1. We have not installed an audio driver yet, but I'll keep it at 1, and you may have to adjust this depending on what your audio codec and motherboard is. So for now, this is good. Disable drivers, doing nothing here. GUI. I just left all this as default. Now it may come up like this, or it may come up as something else, but just take a look at all of these. And my theme is the Tony Mac x86. And there's other themes that you can download or make your own for the Clover splash page, and that shows all your hard drives and the neat graphics and all that stuff. All right, graphics. This automatically checked by default. I do not have Intel graphics, so I'm just going to uncheck that. I had another setup before where that was checked. It didn't seem to do anything, but if I don't have it, I probably don't need it, so it's probably better to just uncheck it. Kernel patch. These came up Apple RTC, ACES, ACPI, PM. This came up by default. It doesn't appear to do anything, but I'm going to go ahead and uncheck it just for the sake of science there. Kernel PM. This was default, and I have a kernel. I have a Haswell E processor, so I'm going to go ahead and patch that kernel there. And here's a list of patches for your kexts. And once again, you can just populate it with this. And if they're just like this, it doesn't really matter, but it's good to look at it. And many of them are actually disabled if you're not utilizing them by default after your MultiBeast installation. RT variables. Okay, this is going to be a very important screen. Change this to 0x67, and this will stay 0x3. Now, later on, there's a tutorial I have to get iMessage, or messages now, formerly known as iMessage. To get that working, we may have to change this to 28, so we'll see about that. All this, don't worry about at the moment. We'll get into this later when we fix iMessage. The SM BIOS. We chose the iMac, and this is the version here. We are going to probably modify the serial number to get our messages working, formerly known as iMessage, and going to make a few changes here. But so this, just leave it as is. System parameters. Inject kexts. Let's change this to yes, and no caches. System ID and NVIDIA Web. We haven't installed it yet, but we're going to go ahead and check that now. And then after this, we will install the NVIDIA Web driver to this text mode here. This is where it'll show you some of the things that are patched, and which is basically a representation of this stuff here. It just is not the base 64 hex conversion that's done automatically by Clover Configurator. Okay, real important. Let's go to install/update. I'm sorry, let's go to install drivers. Okay, this 32-bit stuff right here, don't concern ourselves with. Driver 64-bit, nothing there. But we do want to concern ourselves with driver UEFI 64-bit. This is our UEFI partition. This is going to be default, Data Hub, DXE, OSX, Optio, Fixed 2. Now, some people have trouble with this 2, so you can simply uncheck that and check that, and that will replace it. But in my case, or this particular case, this works. And you can manually do it in the UEFI 64-bit driver folder, which I can show you later. Now, other people have had issues with VBox HFS. So you want to go ahead and uncheck that and add HFS plus UEFI. And that will hopefully help with your having persistent kernel panics, such as, I believe, kernel cache error, 0x9, 0xe, and runtime errors, some of those things. This apparently will fix that. But for me, this got me up and running and working. And let me show you where that folder is. And there are some people online that did fixes for these OptioFix. There's one is OptioFix 3, or sorry, free, I believe, that may fix some further issues. I'll put some links in the description there if that helps. But let me show you where to find that actual folder. Go to our UEFI partition, Clover, and drivers 64 UEFI. And that's all these guys here. So this, simply clicking this here will correspond to here, and you see that disappear. So let's go ahead and put that back the way we found it. All right. So that is your driver situation. And I'm going to go ahead and quit Clover Configurator. One other important thing I want to show you is go to System Preferences, Energy Saver. Make sure this is set to never. If your computer goes to sleep automatically, when it wakes up, you're going to get an error that your USB devices or devices are using too much power. Turn it off and reboot. You will probably have issues with that, and it may take several reboots to get it back up and running again. And uncheck this put hard drive to sleep when possible. One thing that does apparently work without any issues is screensaver. If it goes to the screensaver, you probably won't have any issues, but if you are, go ahead and start after never. But for me, it seems to work. Also, if you go to sleep manually, go to your Apple menu and sleep, it'll go to sleep and you can actually wake up like normal, hitting the space bar or moving the mouse or trackball, and that'll work. All right, that's it. Please remember to like and subscribe below. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the bottom. Anything I may have missed, please feel free to let me know, and I'll update the information. Thanks a lot.